The playoffs are now upon us. We are recording this on Sunday, May 23rd. Daniel Elmore, Jack Hubert here. Really quick, I just want to know your general big picture thoughts on this season. How did you feel about it?
The season kind of wasn't that great.
Yeah.
You turn on a game and it would be two really good teams. And one of the two teams would just be getting blown out. Mm-hmm. And then it would be game one of a two-game back-to-back. And then in the second game, the other team would blow the other team out. There was a consistency to the fact that teams were just falling apart one game and then blowing out the other team the other game that made for kind of an uninteresting watch for a lot of the national broadcasts. You know, us being Warrior fans, we were treated with a pretty wild and fun Warrior season. We'll talk about that later. But in terms of the national broadcasts, play was kind of wild and uneven throughout most of the games. And then on top of that, this is, I guess, a smaller issue and one that you can't really fix because of the circumstances of COVID. But the broadcasters were not tuned in this year. There was a lot.
They were off their games a little bit.
They were really off of their games because a lot of them were not broadcasting together. They were broadcasting separately from wherever they were living. They just had their own little studio booth set up. And a lot of the time they would just talk over each other. They would stumble. They would say, "Oh, sorry, pardon me, go ahead." The whole season was very, very messy. We ended up at the end of the season where I think we expected to end up, with the standings and with a lot of the players and awards and stuff. But it was kind of just messy getting there. So that's my big takeaway.
I think for me, a lot of it was a weird season, and I think a lot of that boils down to just kind of general basketball fatigue.
Yeah.
The last season, the NBA Finals ended mid-September or something. And then we had the draft right after that. And then free agency. And then the season started 2 weeks later. And there was just never really that breathing room to get get the hype back up. Because we have the season normally and then we have the playoffs and there's all the hype. And then it dies down and we get a little break and then we have the draft and that's a big hype week, and then free agency starts and we get all the Woj bombs and everything and that's another big week. Mm-hmm. And then we have 2 or 3 months of kind of nothing going on, and then we start building back up towards the season. And this was just peak all the time because the off season was so condensed, and it just, I think it made the early portion of the season really feel kind of nothing was going on.
Yeah.
It felt so unimportant every game early on in the season. And that, when games don't feel important, they're not interesting.
Yeah, they kind of baseballified the NBA because it was just a consistent year of basketball, basically, with very little break. And also, not having fans in the stands, obviously understandable because of COVID, just couldn't do it. But that also led to some of these uneven blowouts in most of these back-to-back games, is because if you're in a crowdless environment and you're down by 15 in the third quarter, you have no reason to get back into the game if the home crowd isn't cheering you on. Mm-hmm. So you'd end up with an interesting enough first half where it's a 6-point game at half, and then someone would go on a tear in the third quarter, and then the rest of the game it would be over. They would send in the reserves with 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So, I mean, I love basketball, so I'm not going to be oh, this season sucked. It was weird though. That's all.
I don't want to go all old man on it too, but the load management was a lot this year.
Yeah.
Because the NBA just openly let teams do it. Mm-hmm. So there's guys who I think we're going to go through our all NBA teams in a second. There's guys for me who probably should have made the all NBA team, but set for me the standard was you had to play 50 games.
Okay.
Which was you missed about 20 games then. And then tanking too. There's a lot of teams doing some atrociously obvious tank jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, the Thunder sent Al Horford home 2 weeks in the season.
Yeah.
And we're just yeah, you're old. Just don't come anymore.
Uh-huh. With the play-in tournament, I was a big fan of it last year, and so I'm a big fan of it this year, and I'm going to be a big fan of it next year. I think it's a very successful and smart addition for the NBA because it just adds a little bit more heat to the end of the season. With that being said, though, play-in tournament, good idea. This year, didn't work, though, because the Warriors ended up getting bounced. And so the most interesting, fun team that could have been in a one-round playoff series ended up getting bounced by the Lakers and then the Grizzlies. And so the Grizzlies end up making the 8th seed. And so in the old system, the Warriors would have been the 8th seed. by 1 game over the Grizzlies. They would have had a 4-game playoff series. You would have gotten to see Steph Curry just shoot the lights out for 4 games, probably lose the series 3-1, maybe 3-2 if they could make a run. But instead, they get bounced in 2 tight, sloppy games, and now the Memphis Grizzlies are going to get swept in in their first series.
I mean,
so that's tough.
Memphis versus Utah, as much as like I like the Grizzlies team a lot, they're going to get just trounced in the first round, especially if Donovan Mitchell's healthy. And we'll circle back around to this later on. But no disrespect to Memphis. I am a big Ja Morant guy. But
yeah, no, they'll be good.
Anyways, let's start with our all-NBA teams. There's about like 40 guys, I feel like, for the 15 spots on here.
You already said that the big issue is like games played. So there's a lot of shifting. And then on top of that, it also depends on your personal beliefs on like how you should vote for the positions on the all-NBA team. Because if you're going with Jokic and Embiid on your first team, that's 2 centers and you're calling one of them a power forward. Similarly with Luka, you could call him a forward or a guard. Also, same with Jimmy Butler. You could call him a forward or a guard. So depending on how you view the positions also creates a lot of shifting. So there's a lot of weirdness that could happen. I'm sure that we're going to get exactly what we expect when the all-NBA rosters come out. But there is a potential for some weirdness and some weird shifting around that could happen.
Yeah, well, let's just jump into it then. My first team, all-NBA, I had Steph Curry, Dame Lillard. I feel like those two are just, like, those guys are MVP candidates for me.
They're locks, yeah.
I feel like they're 100% in. Giannis I also had as a lock in there. Giannis, I think, because he's had 2 incredible MVP seasons before this. People don't realize, like, how good his year was this year. But he was still, like, a lock for me. And then Jokic, also a lock, might very well win the MVP, probably will. And then it was that second forward spot that was tough for me there. That was like the one spot where I'm like, okay, I don't necessarily feel like putting Embiid there as a forward because I just don't think he is a forward at all.
Yeah.
And then I was debating Luka, if I could move Luka to a forward, and I feel like you have more justification for that than you do Embiid. But at the end of the day, I decided to go Kawhi as my second forward spot for first team All-NBA. I was trying to keep it as true to the positions that they have, even though I think the All-NBA team should be positionless at this point because that's kind of what basketball is.
Right, and I'll save more takes for Embiid when we talk about MVP as well. But yeah, he definitely should be going on the second team. I agree with your top list. Yeah, I'm all good there. Then second team, who do you have?
Second team, I got Luka's on there at the first guard spot. CP3, I put on there too.
Yeah. Jimmy
Butler, I have on there too, just the way he affects the game for them on both ends of the court. Julius Randle, I put on there from our
Knicks
New York
Nation.
Knicks Nation, rise up. I mean, he was just phenomenal all year long. Easy lock for most improved player as well. And then Embiid, we already talked about. I got him at my number 2 center spot.
Third team,
third team was tough because this is where it's like, okay, there's like another 30 guys I feel like could make the third team here.
Yeah.
But at the center position, I got Rudy Gobert. Just defensively, how he impacts the game, gotta be on there. Bradley Beal, I have at the guard spot. Kyrie Irving, I put on there too. Kind of like a sneaky good year for Kyrie because I feel like he's the least talk about out of that big 3 there, but 50, 40, 90 club for him. Zion makes my list too at one of the forward spots. Zion, really good year for him this year. Kind of dominant. I loved when when Lonzo was out for a little bit this year and they would run point Zion sometimes, put Zion at the point. That was just fun to watch.
It was unstoppable. You send him up the court and he can just drive to the post and it's over. Nobody can match him.
Someone who's that fast and like 300 pounds, there's not someone alive who can like body that guy up. Like he's just so big and so fast, and I'm very excited to see where he goes in the future. And then the last forward spot, I was stuck between 2 guys. If Jaylen Brown doesn't get hurt, he probably makes it for me here. But alas, he did. I love Jaylen Brown. My last two spots for the forward were down between Sabonis from Indiana and Jason Tatum, and I gave the edge to Jason Tatum there.
No LeBron James.
No LeBron. Didn't meet the criteria.
No Paul George.
No Paul George.
No Russell Westbrook. No Donovan Mitchell. No Devin Booker.
No. If Mitchell doesn't get hurt, he's probably on the team for sure.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, this is one of those things. This is shout out to Ryan Russillo. One of his best takes is just like, whenever there's an all-star game or whenever there's all NBA voting, guys get left out. Mm-hmm. That's just it. That's all that there is to it. And like, that's what this is. So like Devin Booker, great year. You know, a lot of these guys played really well. They're not going to make the team. You want to go through MVP and all the other awards?
Yeah, sure. Defensive player of the year. I'm going Draymond Green. A bit of a homer pick.
There we go.
A bit of a homer pick. But, you know, Draymond affects the game defensively in so many ways. The Warriors had the 5th best defense in the NBA this year. You saw the difference that they had when Draymond was off the court compared to when he was on. Rudy Gobert's great defensively. Rudy Gobert very likely will win it. But Draymond's ability to guard all 5 positions and do more on defense than Gobert can gave him the lead for me.
Yeah, I agree with the assessment there. Rudy's going to win it. I think Draymond Green sees the court in a different way than pretty much anyone that's ever played the game of basketball. My only other take here is just that Rudy Gobert, I think, got trashed a lot. Part of that's because of the COVID situation. Part of that's because of, he's a center in a league that doesn't really need a ton of immobile big men that can't shoot. But I really think Rudy Gobert is an excellent player. Like he impacts the game so dramatically that like he's worth the money that he's getting paid. So yeah, Rudy Gobert is going to win Defensive Player of the Year. I would love to see Draymond win it though. We're big fans. We're
big fans of Draymond. I think Draymond is one of the most disrespected and underrated players in NBA history. I've just been thinking about that a lot in general recently. Not necessarily like Draymond, but just how like the way the NBA Twitter culture and media culture is set up is that in order to like talk about how good one player is, we have to absolutely trash another player. Like we can't talk about how good Michael Jordan is without mentioning LeBron's final record, or we have to pit Steph and Dame against each other. And I'm like, we should just give all these people their respect and their roses. And I'm done hating on players now. I'm over it.
Yes,
I don't dislike a single player in the NBA.
There's no room for it. There's no need for it. At the end of the day, we're playing a game. Let's have fun. Because in order to love something, you have to hate something. That's always been the idea. But that's just not the case. You can just love, and love some more.
Yeah, like I love my mom doesn't mean I have to hate your mom. Like
that's exactly right.
Like that's the stupidity we've gotten to at this point.
Moving on. Which one do you want to do next?
Let's do Rookie of the Year next. Let's save the big award for the end.
Yeah, the most improved.
The most improved player.
That's the big one. Yeah. No, okay, yeah. So Rookie of the Year. It's only 3 guys. It's LaMelo, it's Anthony Edwards, it's Tyrese Halliburton. Which one are you going with?
I'm going Anthony Edwards here. If LaMelo doesn't get hurt, he probably has a much better chance at winning it. Anthony Edwards was really damn good this year, especially down the stretch. Like once he got comfortable with being in the NBA and was getting more used to the game, like this dude was putting up like towards the end of the year like 25, 30 points a night. Like he is a very talented scorer and a good example of like why I think teams need to have patience with players. Like people don't come into the league averaging 28 points a game like Michael Jordan did his rookie year. That's just not a thing that happens. Like could you imagine if like NBA Twitter was around when like Kobe was a rookie and scored like 9 points a game? Or like I was talking like to someone on Twitter the other day about the Warriors. Like a lot of Warriors fans think like they should trade James Wiseman for insert whatever like third rate, like maybe fringe all-star player.
Yeah, Zach LaVine or something.
Zach LaVine. Aaron Gordon was the guy for a while. Like no disrespect, great players. These are the same Warriors fans that like wanted to trade Klay Thompson for Kevin Love. Or, we're asking the team to pick Monte Ellis over Steph Curry. But Anthony Edwards is great. That's my point here.
Yeah, Anthony Edwards is great. He ended up averaging, I think, 19 points a game. So, like, the first quarter of the season, people were just slaughtering him. Like, this is your number one overall pick? This is your champion? And I think, yeah, he got a lot better. Despite all that, I'm still going with LaMelo just because the level of excitement and talent that he displayed in his albeit shorter amount of time was so much farther ahead of all of the rookies, in my opinion. He had that sort of magic that none of the other rookies did. Anthony Edwards was like pretty consistent by the end of the year and like pretty good, but LaMelo was an absolute star. And if he played like 45 games, it would be over. He played 51. That's all I need. Incredible steals, incredible assists, incredible shot making. Surprisingly, I thought he was going to be a pretty terrible shooter. He still
much better 3-point shooter than I anticipated as well. Yeah,
still has a ways to go, but like pretty good shooter. Saw the court, kind of the way that we were just talking about Draymond with being defensive player of the year. LaMelo just sees the court in a way that none of the other rookies do. And that's kind of tough to vote on because it's just it's not a real tangible thing that you can look at and just know. It's more eye test. So all of these reasons, I'm still going with LaMelo, but Anthony Edwards definitely would be deserving, I suppose. But if LaMelo, that's the other thing is like, if not for the injuries, it would be LaMelo so clearly.
Another award, strong arguments for several guys. MVP. We have the finalists now ahead of this pod. The finalists are Joel Embiid, Steph Curry, and Nikola Jokic. Who are you going with for the MVP?
Steph Curry backpacked the Warriors, but also Jokic backpacked Denver after Jamal Murray went down. Jokic played 71 games. Incredibly healthy. They lost their second superstar, and so he did a lot of the things that, granted, their team is a lot better than the Warriors, so I'm not making this out to be a complete apples-to-apples comparison, but still, when one of their superstars went down, he took over, he put on the cape and said, let's go, I'll carry you. Jokic is the MVP. Curry is a tight second for me, though. Jokic had a pretty remarkable season, but some of his advanced analytics are kind of stupid, Shaq-like numbers. It's a no-lose situation, whoever you go with.
Yeah, Jokic was incredible. I'm giving it to Steph, though. And that's like maybe a homer pick. I don't care. Steph was like, if you take Steph Curry off these Warriors, they're like a 5-win team this year.
No question.
Like, they're not a good team. Okay, Steph's more fun also. Sorry. It's an entertainment thing. I'm giving it to Steph. Jokic, absolutely incredible. Jokic will win it. Jokic deserves to win it. I'm giving it to Steph, though, because that's my pick. I think Steph was the guy this year. I think if you take Jokic off the Nuggets, they're obviously not as good, but I don't think they're a terrible team still. They still have Michael Porter Jr. and, Aaron Gordon, who, I maybe slandered him a little earlier, saying the Warrior, he was a third-rate guy. But, MPJ, Aaron Gordon, they got pieces there still. If you take Steph off the Warriors, they're not even, sniffing some of these teams.
Yeah, and I think that this speaks to a broader issue with MVP is we redefine what MVP means every single season. Sometimes it's who had the most dominant physical season. Sometimes it's the most dominant statistical season. Sometimes it's whoever had the greatest impact. Like Russ Westbrook won an MVP on a team that was not particularly good. He just backpacked the team. Jokic has a team that's really good and is a big contributor to that and has the stats. And is also, Steph Curry is without question the funnest player or most fun player in the NBA. Jokic is also a super fun player. I don't want to make it seem like he's not fun. He's like one of the most fun centers. His ability to pass the ball is up there with anybody in the league. It's like Steph, Kyrie. You can name a couple of other guys. LaMelo Ball will be up there pretty soon. Jokic is right up there also. So his ability to affect the game, passing, shooting. I think we decided pretty early in the season that it was going to be between Jokic and Embiid, and then Curry just very steadily continued his success and rose to the very, very top. Look at him. Look at Curry, man.
So inspirational.
Look at Curry, man. So inspirational.
It was Steph better.
I don't think there's a universe in which Curry wins, but I do think he'll get some first place votes.
Let's spend, while we're talking about Curry, let's spend 2 minutes talking about this Warrior season before we dive into the playoffs. I wrote a piece about this Warrior season. I wrote a little article about it. I've decided I'm going to start doing that because why not? If you want to find them, you can find me on Twitter at Jack Hubert Sucks. And they're, right there. But I wrote about how basically this Warriors season was imperfect, and like that's what made it so fun. Is it was an up and down season. Obviously, I wish Klay was there. I wish like Wiseman stayed healthy, but just watching some of the players on this team really step up and develop. Guys like, Juan Toscano Anderson. Love that man to death. Jordan Poole was one of the like surprise stories of the year. You could throw him on a ballot for most improved player. Not better than Randall, but like you can make a case for that. Andrew Wiggins stepped up. Seeing Draymond and Curry play at like the top of their games, I really enjoyed watching the season, even though it ended in a disappointing fashion.
This season for the Warriors was like the first 10 minutes of a really good play, wherein the main character doesn't show up until page like, I don't know, 15 or so. And you just get like all of these weird, eccentric, other like tertiary characters that are setting the scene. That's basically what this season was to next season, because we get the setup of what's to come next year. We got all of these young guys developing slowly, very painfully for some of them. And then by the end of the season, they really had figured out who they are, what their role is, and how they're going to contribute to the team going forward. So then by the time next season starts, when the main characters are finally in the play, all of those tertiary characters have had the time to like really figure out who they are and to set the scene. And so it's going to be a surprisingly deep team because of that. When Juan Toscano Anderson is on one night your starter, and then the next night your ninth man, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty sweet. So shout out to everybody on this team this year, because they gave it their all. It was really ugly for the first half of the year, like really ugly. But then they all figured out how to play with Steph Curry, because that is a very unique sort of style and way of playing basketball. But sure enough, they figured it out. They're going to go into this offseason hungry as hell. You could tell after the way that the season ended, everybody was very, very disappointed, very upset. And when Steph gets down, it's really obvious. It's very clear, because he's such a gregarious and fun-loving kind of person. He was bummed out. And so come this time next year, the NBA is going to have a problem.
Yeah, if they get Klay back at, even 80%, like, they're going to be a problem for teams. That's what, like, I was talking to people about that too, and I love Kent Bazemore. Kent Bazemore is a great energy guy. Do you think if, like, they're starting Klay Thompson 80% as opposed to Kent Bazemore against the Lakers, they're scoring 3 more points? Probably.
No question. They're the 7th seed. Yeah.
They're the 7th seed. Like, they have 2 lottery picks. I kind of have a feeling they won't use both of them. Whether that be they bundle them together and trade up for, a higher pick, or if they, trade one of them for a player. I know everyone wants them to make a big move. I just don't know, like, when you look around the landscape of the NBA, what type of, like, big time players are out there to be had. But regardless, I think they add, 1 or 2 more veterans in there. It's going to be a dangerous team. I think, we'll let the West have their fun this year. Utah and Phoenix and all those teams, enjoy it. Enjoy it while it lasts, because, we're coming back next year. And
this will be my last point on the Warriors. Just when you look at the kind of season that Wiggins had defensively, you look at the improvement physically that Steph Curry had. He used to get bodied a lot by other guards. They would be able to shove him off and he'd go flying. This year, he like literally just got stronger physically, because he started lifting, throwing heavy weights around, So he just got a little bit better defensively. So you consider Steph Curry's better defensively. Wiggins is very good defensively. Klay Thompson is an all-NBA defensive player, caliber kind of guy. Draymond Green is the best defender in the NBA. Then you add Wiseman, who's going to probably get 2 blocks a game. This team's going to be really good defensively, and that was the key to the teams that won championships for this Warriors organization. They were the best offensive team, and they were the best defensive team all 5 years. And so the fact that the defense is going to get set right when Klay comes back, that's very exciting. I think we have a lot of potential. Not in the playoffs this year, but let's talk about the playoffs anyway, I guess. I guess we'll talk about them. I guess we'll watch them still. What teams to you in this playoff are, especially intriguing? I kind of want to just tie together 2 questions that you proposed in the outline. One of them was just like to talk about these teams, and the other one was to talk about like certain players whose legacy is affected by these playoffs, because I think they obviously go hand in hand. The most interesting teams, the most interesting storylines are the ones that are affected by individual player legacy. So let's just start with the Brooklyn Nets, because if there's if you had to just pick one player whose legacy could be completely changed by this postseason, it's James Harden. James Harden has been thirsting for a ring for so long. He's a great player. You know, I have my issues with James Harden. Everyone has their issues with James Harden. He probably doesn't get the respect that he deserves, and I hate saying that. He knows that. He feels that. He knows that he's not getting the love that he deserves. He's an all-time great offensive player, and he knows that he should be in the MVP race every single year. He should be competing for titles every single year, and so this is the first time that he really has like the clearest path. They got to go through the 76ers. They got to go through a number of really good teams in the East, and then whoever comes out of the West, obviously. But Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, James Harden, Joe Harris, shout out to one of the best shooters in the NBA. And then on top of that, Blake Griffin and the whole rest of the team, you know, Claxton and the rest of the crew.
Claxton.
Yeah, Claxton's dope. No matter what the reason is, if they get bounced before the finals, that's pretty tough. That's going to be tough for James. And if they win it, instantly conversations become different. They just do, you know, even though like everybody calls Kevin Durant's championships asterisk championships, it still changes the conversation about Kevin Durant because he went toe to toe with the best player in the NBA, LeBron James, and beat him multiple times, multiple seasons. And so instantly, you know, before Kevin Durant went down, he was just the best player in the NBA. Everyone was already ready to anoint him as the best player in the NBA. You gotta kind of consider the fact that that's possible with James Harden as well. If he goes toe to toe with whoever he goes up against, if he has just an unbelievable playoff series, back to back to back to back, if he's the playoff MVP, he wins the Finals MVP. We can't clown his ass for his playoff failures anymore because you know it took it took Michael Jordan. Freudian slip there. It took Michael Jordan. It took Michael Jordan many, many years before he even had the opportunity to really compete for a championship. And so James Harden is in this very particular position that if he wins it, conversations change. If he loses it, it's going to be ugly because like as soon as he went to the Brooklyn Nets, it became, oh, they're a guaranteed success. They're going to win the finals. It's going to be interesting for the Nets.
Yeah, this Nets team is fascinating. That Nets team has three of the best like bucket getters in NBA history.
Yeah.
And in the playoffs, that's so huge. I think there's a lot of teams who like that's kind of their biggest flaw in these playoffs is that they don't necessarily have that guy on the perimeter who can go and get you a bucket late in the game.
Yeah.
The Nets have three of them and three of the best to do them. And the legacies, you know, look different for all those guys. If they win a title this year, things really start looking different. I think the one team in the East that can maybe give them problems is the Sixers. And, you know, everyone talks about how bad the Nets defense is. I don't really think it's all that horrible, except in the front court. I don't know who in a series against the Sixers is going to be able to stop Joel Embiid on that team.
Yeah.
Blake Griffin ain't doing it. I don't think DeAndre Jordan at this point in his career is doing it. Are you throwing Claxton in there? That's going to be a tough matchup for them because I think the Sixers can also defend them too. With Thibault and Simmons, you're sacrificing then a little bit of offense, but you have at least two guys who can lock down two of those three, and then you just need Tobias Harris to do a half-decent job on the other one. And I think they're an interesting team. I'm really hoping that we get that finals because it'd be a lot of fun. That conference finals, I should say.
Yeah, to your point about the Nets defense, Kevin Durant is kind of a sneaky all-time great defensive player. He can guard 1 through 5 just like Simmons can. He's really, really good on defense. And it was something he never got the credit for until he came to the Warriors. One of the big wins for him about coming to the Warriors was that his defense was really recognized. And there's this particular aspect about like the playoffs where if you're a superstar, even if you're not known for defense, it's going to come out because defense is so much just passion based. It's just reactionary, and it's how much you want it, how much you want to stop this guy, and how much you want to just destroy him, his legacy, his career. You want to kill him. For the 76ers, they're such a good team. It kind of sucks that
we were right about them. We were right on them at the beginning of the year.
The 76ers, though, like I feel so bad because this should be like their year to win a title. Despite the fact that they're so good on defense, I just don't think it's going to matter. How many times has James Harden had a hand in his eyeball as he shot from like half court, basically?
Yeah.
On top of that, if Kevin Durant's the last one taking the shot, he's 7 feet tall. Who's going to get a hand up on that ball?
Ben Simmons.
Ben Simmons is tall. He can match up, but like nobody matches up with Kevin Durant's length.
Right,
Arms up, nobody matches up. So if Kevin Durant's the last one to take a shot, it's all just going to come down to whether or not he hits the shot. That sounds obvious, but like there's no defender on the planet that's going to dramatically affect that last shot if KD is taking it.
I think for me, the only like other team in the East that has a shot is the Bucks. And, we were talking about legacies. The legacy for Giannis is really interesting at this point, especially if the Bucks, don't get to the finals again this year. This is going to be like 3 straight years now where they're one of the top teams and they're not able to get to the finals. They're not able to get out of the East in large part because of Giannis and the limitations in his game. Mm-hmm. They squeaked out a win against the Heat last night, which that's going to be a tough series for them. I think they come out on top, but won't be easy. And Giannis was missing free throws down the stretch. Maybe he's not a number one guy. Maybe he's not the guy who can be the, number one option on your championship team.
I think the Bucks could use a Daryl Morey transformation, just like the 76ers did. Because we were all ready to just kill Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons and say break it up and ship them out. Because, like, can either of those guys really be the bucket getter in the last 30 seconds of a game? It's the same thing with Giannis. It's not that he isn't who we think he is. It's that he is who we think he is, because we're constantly having this conversation about Giannis and his limitations. So we know that he has those limitations. We know that that is the player that he is. And yet we're surprised by the fact that that is the player that he is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think part of the issue comes too is that we view Giannis, and in large part because they play him there, but like we view him as a wing guy. Mm-hmm. Like he's not a wing guy. He's not a perimeter scorer. He's really like, if they played him at the 5 and replaced Brook Lopez with, Joe Harris, for example, like you said,
yeah,
totally different team. Like, I think Giannis isn't like, if Giannis is your primary ball handler, primary perimeter scorer, I think that's not necessarily a position you want to be in. He's like fantastic. He's versatile and skilled, but he's really more of a 5, I think, than, that wing, that dominant wing that you need to win a championship.
When you go top heavy, it's almost impossible to get deep as a team. So it almost behooves you to get more top heavy, which is what the Nets did. So the Nets,
that's what the Warriors did when they signed Durant.
Exactly. Just get more top heavy, because like once you're already top heavy, you're not swinging that pendulum back over. You're just not going to get the depth unless, the Warriors got kind of lucky because like guys like David West came to the team, guys that wanted to compete. And we had Sean Livingston.
You're going to need vet minimum guys to perform above their contracts, which is tough to find.
Exactly. And so the Nets tried to get that with Blake Griffin and so on and so forth. But so the Bucks are in an interesting position where, they could go out and get like a max contract shooter, because that would be the top heavy approach. Like, let's just get more top heavy. Let's try to get more superstars to pair with Giannis. Or let's do the opposite and just continue to get deeper, because they are a pretty deep team already. But depth at shooting, basically.
All right, before we move to the West, who's coming out of the East for you? Who's your pick?
Oh, boy. You can't say that the Nets aren't coming out of the East. It's at the beginning of the year, we talked about the Lakers, and I said that barring injury, there's no question that they're going to be back in the finals. And I still do believe that. But the issue is barring injury. And so as long as the Nets stay healthy, they're going to make the finals. The only issue is they have not proven that they can stay healthy yet this year. Nets are going to make it to the finals. If not the Nets, then it'll be the 76ers. Again, if the 76ers make it, it means that something went horribly wrong with the Nets.
Yeah, I'm going with the Sixers. I don't even think necessarily something has to go horribly wrong. I just think, I got a good feeling about this Sixers team. I'll just leave it at that. I think Joel Embiid is... I like him in a series against the Nets. I think it'd be a very fun series. Probably go 6-7 games. Be very competitive. Just a gut feeling. I'm going with the Sixers.
I like it. I like the Sixers. Over to the West. Another like legacy guy, Chris Paul. Because Chris Paul has been slandered and trashed for years for his playoff failures. Most of the time, it's not really his fault. He's just going up against teams that are flat out better than his team. And this year is going to be one of those years where like they have this incredible year. He's an MVP candidate. He's all NBA. He's done everything that he possibly can. And then they just get a bad matchup and they're out in the first round. It's just over.
I don't know about that. I'm not, I'll come back to the Chris Paul stuff, but I'm not sold on this Lakers team, man. I'm really not. I know the defense on that. The defense is phenomenal. That's their calling card there. I watch them and I don't see the offensive firepower there. And maybe LeBron flips the switch and turns it on, but LeBron hasn't quite looked the same this year. Even in that playoff game, he looked a step slower. Anthony Davis, he needs to be more aggressive. I think Anthony Davis has to be that guy for them in the playoffs. He has to be the alpha. Sometimes I think maybe, they won the title last year and he was a big part of that. So this is like weird to say, but I think he doesn't always know how to play in the playoffs is what it seems like because he doesn't have all that experience. He needs to like flip the playoff switch that I was just talking about with LeBron that, we see Draymond do. Like you need to step your game up in the playoffs and Anthony Davis needs to do that. And that's like, he's going to be the key factor for them in this series against the Suns because the Suns' front court defense, I don't think is all that great. I'm a big DeAndre Ayton guy, but I don't know how he's going to hold up against AD in a series. Yeah, I'm not 100% sold on this Lakers team. They're very good. They're very talented. I don't know if the offense is there. And granted, I said the same exact thing last year, so what do I know?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, was we had the exact same conversation last year. LeBron was over the hill. He looked like he wasn't the same coming into the playoffs.
But it's for real this time.
I think also, like the Warriors game was deceptive because the Warriors caught the Lakers on their worst possible night. Dennis Schroeder was awful. He's not going to be awful every playoff game. He's going to be good. He's going to score 17 points a game, get some assists, get some steals. Anthony Davis still looks like he's, and then LeBron first half, and LeBron does this so much. I don't know if it's a conscious choice or if he just needs time to ease into the game, but how often is it that like a first half ends and LeBron has like 12 points, not super efficient. It doesn't look like he's involved all that much. Everyone else is kind of taking the shots. And then the Van Gundy and Mark Jackson will say, LeBron James has to take more shots and be more aggressive. And then in the second half he does. And by the end of the game, he's got 32. That's almost every playoff game for LeBron James. And so I think there's a level to his game that's just like very patient. Mm-hmm. He knows when to peak. And he proved that last year. Anthony Davis, again, got better as the year went on, figured it out in the playoffs. Guys stepped up. I think their team is just better than it was last year.
Here's what they need to do. I've decided this is what they have to do. Mm-hmm. They need to play AD at the 5. I know AD doesn't like playing the 5, but they need to have AD out there and not Andre Drummond.
Yes.
Like they need, because if you have Andre Drummond, AD, and LeBron, that's not a lot of shooting out there. Like you're probably gonna have Schroeder out there too, and he's like a decent shooter, but you need like AD at the 5 opens up the court more for them. And Drummond also, we saw the Warriors just put Drummond in the pick and roll every time he was out there, and he had no chance against Steph.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm still going with the Lakers, but the reason I bring up the Chris Paul part of it was just that like if he does get bounced in this first round, it's because the Lakers are just better. And it has nothing to do with Chris Paul, but still his legacy will be in question. His manhood will be put into question. And he's just going to be one of those tortured players in the course of NBA history that never won a title.
Yep.
And that's tough to come back from.
Big legacy playoff for the Clippers.
That's where I was going next.
Especially after yesterday when they lost game 1. But and what happened last year? I think more so for Paul George, this is an important series than Kawhi, because I take that back for both of them, because I feel like if the Clippers go on to win the title and Kawhi wins Finals MVP, he's launching himself up into that next tier of all-time great players.
3 titles, 3 separate teams,
3 Finals MVPs, that's special stuff that Kawhi would be doing. So that's important for them. Paul George had a rough time in the bubble last year. He's got to bounce back. And I think just for the franchise as a whole, like I think maybe that's where I'm going with this, is it's more of a franchise legacy issue than like an individual player one. Because like if they get bounced by the Mavs in the first round this year, that's tough. That's like maybe they are the cursed Clippers. Like maybe nothing good can happen to this franchise. They have a good team. I think they kind of, if you look at the actual players and all the pieces, I think objectively to me, they're the most talented team in the West. But they got to show up. They got to show up. And it's a big game for the franchise. And I don't know where they go from here if they can't get it done, if they don't reach the finals.
And it's funny because they have different problems than the teams that we've been talking about. Like with the Bucks, like who's taking the last shot? Giannis is not really an incredible shooter. So like if your superstar isn't taking the last shot, then what, like Anton Chigurh in No Country for Old Men. He's like, if you followed a rule and it led you to this, what was the point of the rule? It's like, if you have a superstar and he doesn't take the last shot, what's the point of the superstar? The Clippers are not that though. The Clippers have Kawhi Leonard, who is one of the great stories in NBA history. Cause like dude like couldn't shoot. And now he's like a knockdown efficient shooter, especially in clutch times.
Kawhi's a free agent too. Kawhi can opt out after this year. So
the whole team could be blown up.
Yeah, so like this is big for them, big time.
And what happens if like we find out that Kawhi never really liked Ty Lue? He didn't feel involved in the coaching hire. He wasn't a fan of the offense. He wanted to do more this, that, or the other thing. And Paul George also didn't like Ty Lue. He has a horrible playoff series and then he gets traded. Now Kawhi's friend is gone. Kawhi doesn't want to hang out with whoever is left on the team. He opts out. And now you're in like Houston Rockets territory.
Yep. Where you don't have draft picks. They got to make it to the finals, I think, in order for this team to like really stay together. Like that's got to be the goal for them here.
Yeah, a competitive conference finals would be fine for me. Also in the West, I just want to mention the Utah Jazz.
Yeah.
I don't know what happens if they don't succeed. That's all.
I do want to talk about this. I'm going to tie another team into this too. The Portland Trailblazers and the Utah Jazz, I feel like are in a similar spot. And this may be more of a big picture, team building question. But what do you do if something just doesn't work? Like if you keep trying to do something and it doesn't work, where do you go for that? Like the Jazz, have a very good team, very well-rounded team, a team that's been together for a long time, and they have no finals appearances to show for it yet. Same thing with the Trailblazers. Dame and CJ have been together for a long time. They're a very good team, very fun team. I actually think they're going to beat the Nuggets in round one. But where do they go if they don't, make the finals? What do you do to make a team better when you've been good and you're making the playoffs every year and you have these, fan favorite players, but you're not getting the results you need? Do you just keep going with that and keep making the playoffs and keep like kind of knowing you're not going to win it all, or what do you do?
And this is where great GMs are made, great executives. This is why Daryl Morey has the 76ers in a position to possibly win a title this year. Because we were in a position with the 76ers. What do? You have pieces. We just don't know how to put the pieces into the forming picture. The Trailblazers have incredible players. What do you do now? The Clippers have incredible players. What do you do now? The Utah Jazz have a really deep, really fun, very good team. What do you do? And so that's where like good GMs and bad GMs, good executives, bad executives are really made.
Well, how long until, I don't necessarily get the vibe that Dame's this guy, but like how long until Dame says, I'm done with this. We've tried it all and I would like out now. Like that's, I think, more of the, timeline that occurs for teams. Because I think, generally speaking, I think ownership would be okay if you're kind of, making the playoffs every year, getting to the second round, occasionally getting to the, conference finals and losing. But how long is, your star players going to sit there and be like, okay, I'm never going to win a championship here? Because it kind of feels like, the Blazers are on that path a little bit. That like they're in their current iteration, they're not winning anything. They'll get like the 6th seed every year and they'll give us a very fun first round of the playoffs. Maybe they'll get through and then they'll get bounced in the second. Like that's kind of where they seem to be at. And I don't have any answers for that. It's something I'll probably ruminate on for our off-season pod. But what do these teams do when you've kind of hit the wall?
But I do want to say, I think that the Jazz have just as good of a shot at making the finals this year as just about anyone in the West.
I think the West is wide open. I really do. Like, I think, I have the Clippers coming out of the West. That was my pick before the game yesterday, and I'm going to stick with it just because I think the talent on that team is greater than the talent on the other teams. Utah, Phoenix, the Lakers, the Clippers. Hell, the Mavericks got maybe like the best player in the NBA on their team.
Yeah, Kristaps Porzingis.
Kristaps Porzingis, Tim Hardaway Jr. Whenever you have Tim Hardaway Jr.,
yeah,
you have a chance to win. But I mean, seriously, that is like kind of what it comes down to in the playoffs sometimes is if you have the best player, if your best player is better than the other team's best player, you kind of have a shot to win. So, I don't know. I wouldn't count out Dame either. I know we just trashed the Blazers, but, Dame's kind of that guy too. You never know. It's wide open, I think. All these things considered, who do you have winning the finals? Give the people what they want. Everyone loves predictions.
Well, so in the East, we came down to the 76ers or the Nets. I was going with the Nets, so the Nets are going to make it in for me. In the West, the Lakers.
That's the matchup the NBA wants for sure.
Yeah, I'm going with the New York Knicks.
The New York Knicks.
No.
We didn't even talk about them. We don't have time, but shout out to the Knicks.
Just to be interesting, I'm going to say the Lakers are going to win it against the Nets. Everything on paper says Nets are going to win the NBA Finals, but something in the back of my mind is preventing me from going all in on the Nets. Maybe it's just because it's the first year that they've been together and we haven't seen it yet, but something's just floating in the back of my brain pool.
I'm going with the 76ers versus the Clippers in the finals. Underrated storyline of, Doc Rivers against the Clippers. I always forget Doc Rivers is the Sixers head coach in the same way that I haven't even noticed Steve Nash is the Nets head coach. I'm going with the 76ers over the Clippers in the finals. The process is complete. They trusted it. Shout out to Sam Hinkie one time. Yeah. Joel Embiid finals MVP.
And, one last thing, shout out to Joel Embiid, because in the offseason pod, we talked about, is he ever going to get this together? Like, is he ever going to look healthy? Is he ever going to care as much as we think he should? This year, he absolutely did. He proved everybody wrong. He dedicated himself in a way that I wasn't sure was possible. He played like an MVP. He was the MVP before he went down. Joel Embiid's going to turn on a level that we have never seen. He's going to go full Shaq mode, and I'm ready for it.
Yeah, as kind of disappointing the regular season was, I'm very excited about these playoffs because of how, wide open it is. Any last thoughts before we wrap this up?
Final thoughts. I was right about the Knicks. And that's all I have to say about that.
Shout out to the Knicks. When they get another superstar, watch out now that they're a respectable team. That's going to do it for us here on the Nothing Notable podcast, NBA edition. He's been Daniel Elmore. I've been Jack Hubert. Like, comment, subscribe. Follow us on Instagram at Nothing Notable. We have a Twitter that doesn't get used. If you want to follow it there, you can follow me on Twitter at Jack Hubert Sucks. Hope you all have a wonderful life, and we'll see you next time.